Join us live every Thursday at 10 a.m. on the Sherry Lord Show. This is a Holistic Approach podcast with weekly guests, doctors, chiropractors, and so much more gather. Go to www.sherrylord.com. Welcome, everybody. Good morning. I'm your influencer host, Sherry Lord. Thank you for joining us this morning. We have a very special guest today, Lili, Udell, Fiore. And her topic today is tools for caregivers. You're going to get a lot. She is an expert and authority on her topic and in her path and what she does for caregivers. She has a new book release, and it is amazing. She's going to give a giveaway today of her new book release with the signed copy to you personally. And I also want to say that if you want to be on our show, please go to www.sherrylord.com. And we also are doing paid ads. So if you have a new book release, if you are promoting your product or yourself or an event you want to do, go to www.sherrylord.com, and there'll be an application you can fill out and be a part of our team, and we'll do a great job of marketing you. Again, these are paid ads. Welcome, Lili. We're so happy to have you. We're so excited to have this topic with you called Tools for Caregivers. And the other thing I want to say is I'm going to say something just a little bit about you, but you're going to talk more about yourself and about what you offer, and and experience the caregivers, and all more about what you offer. Lili is an author, a new book release, Lili Caregivers Guide. You want to make sure you get this because it is a wealth of information. Millions of people are in a situation where they either knew they were going to caregive or they had no idea that they were going to be a caregiver and need help in how to do that and how to have a balance with themselves. And in her 40s, Lili found herself in the difficult situation that occurs in many people's lives, dealing with aging family members, raising kids, managing her career, her marriage, her busy husband, and being involved in all the activities for her daughter and stepsons that could fit in suddenly. She got a call that her beloved aunt, who lived with many states away, was not well. Faced with managing her aunt's care from afar in between in-person visits, Lili spoke to many professional people about how to manage and handle everything in her aunt's life until she got better. Everybody had their own opinion, and many also had their own agendas that had nothing to do with what was best for her aunt. Eventually, Lili found her way and then was also faced with her aging parents as well. You have lived this, and with many of your own family members that put you in a situation to really become an expert at what you do.
Yes, since I was very young, I have been involved in my grandparents' care and would travel down to Connecticut to see my grandmother on weekends and visit her in the nursing home. And when I was 15, I talked my grandmother into flying me out to Chicago to see what was up with her because she was not well. So it's been a lifelong trend.
Yeah, I mean, it also, what people don't understand, it's time consuming. It's not something that you wouldn't do from your heart because you would want to help another.
It's very time consuming.
Yeah, but there's a lot of intricateness involved, like caring for someone, how to care for them, how to find your own balance with that when you have a life. You had a life.
Correct.
And
I did.
You had a family. You still have a life, but it's a life with family at that time where you were in your life.
Yeah, I was the sandwich generation.
Yeah. So when we're talking about tools for caregivers, can you help give some tips for people who are in that position, how they can find their own balance and how they can manage the loved ones that they're with?
Absolutely. One of the first things I always tell my clients is to go online and go and Google 5lovelanguagesquiz.com and figure out what your love language is, figure out what your loved one's love language is, and everybody else in that core group that's involved in that person. Very often people talk about their loved one is grumpy, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
or their spouse is grumpy. And usually it's because the people that we love are not receiving the love that we're giving them. So you need to understand how they receive love. I fought with my mom my whole life. We were like cats and dogs. I read the book because the quiz didn't exist then. And all of a sudden, I understood my love language is words of affirmation. My mother's love language was acts of service. So I would visit her, I would give her hugs, I would tell her how much I loved her, I would spend quality time with her, I would bring her things. It didn't matter, right? Because she was not understanding that. She was not receiving that as love. So it's really, really important to figure out what your loved one's language is. If they have dementia or cognitive issues and they can't fill out the quiz online, get a couple people together, who know them very well, and fill out the quiz as a group for them, so to speak. And then you'll figure out what lights them up, right? Would mom prefer this or would she have preferred that? That's a huge tool, right? Because once somebody feels loved, then they're going to be a lot nicer because they're going to feel loved. But I also suggest that you redo the test every 3 months, because if you are love starved for one of the love languages, once you get that love language filled, it may rebalance itself. So I think it's just important to reassess every 3 months to see if anything's changed in how you or your loved ones receive love. Because that's paramount, right? That's paramount for all of us. The next thing I would do is, obviously I have my book and I'm going to tell you to buy my book, but my book has all sorts of, one of the biggest things with being a caregiver is being on top of any and all medical issues. And my book is full of tracking forms, all sorts of different things so that you can keep track of every little thing with your loved one's care. And I advise there's a QR code in my book so you don't have to rip it up.
Okay.
You can download all the forms from the book, from the QR code, print out the ones you need, and then I tell you to get a 3-ring binder and put the sheets you need to use in there. And anybody who's helping care for your loved one, make sure they use it too. And then when you go to the doctor's office and he says, well, when did such and such start with your loved one? When did you first notice? Well, guess what? You can flip to that page and say, oh, yes, it was this day at this time with these circumstances. And I have sheets for sundowning, for use of wrong words, for cognitive issues as well. So there's everything, including, a schedule for keeping tracking for how often you clean the CPAP, because you need all these things.
Yes, you do. Yeah.
So I think that's it. Getting organized, I think, is really, really important. I also have the pink, if you look behind me, everything's reversed. Right there.
Yep,
there.
I can see it.
Okay, that's my priority planner for caregivers, and it's designed for caregivers. So there's 6 main priorities everybody has, and if they're a caregiver, and that includes the person they're caregiving. And in the book, every week, it's like a normal planner, so you've got a week for your appointments, but there's also a page for your 6 priorities so that you can write down under your kids or pets, oh, I've got to make brownies for the bake sale. Or you can put under household, oh, the bug guy's coming on this day, and I need to make sure that I get the house ready for it. So you can keep track of all the to-dos that go for each week without filling your calendar full of your to-dos. And then you can easily see which things you've gotten taken care of and can transfer them to the next week that are still outstanding. So
very organized. It feels like it helps organize, because if you're just focusing here, you're not really thinking of this, and this makes everything more smooth, because then you have the awareness, because it can get overwhelming.
It gets very overwhelming.
Someone. So what do you suggest? Because I have a lot of friends and I love all of them, and they're doing the best they can, and they love their family members or they're in the field of a caregiver, but it can get overwhelming. How do
It
they deal
does.
with stress?
Uh,
And they want to do what's well, but it gets irritable. Is there anything they can do?
yeah. There's a whole chapter in my book on taking care of you. And there's 9 pages on different things you can do to lift your mood. If you follow me on social media, every once in a while, we post some of those things. I really think you need to have a higher source. I don't know who you believe in. It's between you and them, but having a higher source, a higher power to plug into to expand your horizons so that you understand that it's more than just what's in front of you. I think that's incredibly important. I mean, so my father was an Episcopal priest and the head of pastoral care at the big hospital in Vermont. He dealt with death and dying every single day. Every single day of his work, he dealt with people on the worst days of their lives. The only reason he was able to do that was because he believed and for him, it was God. And that is what grounded him. And he felt called to do that. So if you're plugged in correctly to a higher power, something that gives everything meaning,
Yeah.
that's a huge difference than if you're just doing this and there's no purpose, rhyme, or reason, right?
Okay, yeah.
So I think that's really important. And it doesn't have to be religious. It can be spiritual. My father used to say that everybody knows God. You just have to figure out where it is that God shows up for them. So like some people will say they're an atheist, but when they're skiing in fresh powder on a mountain, that's where they feel the experience is sacred to them. It's holy, right? So they may not say they believe in God, but they believe in something. There's something that lights them up in that respect. And so identify with whatever it is that lights you up and feed that, because that's going to help feed your soul when everything else is draining it. So that's really important. And I think, it's one of the other problems that I've seen with many clients who are caregivers is sometimes we have situations where we warned our parent or our loved one, you're not taking care of yourself. You need to take care of yourself. Please, I'm begging you, take care of yourself. And they don't. And then they have physical issues which require a full-time caregiver. And guess what? You're the lucky person because there's nobody else. And so there's a lot of very valid anger.
Yeah.
Because I have to clean up your mess because you couldn't adult. So I think it's really important to validate that. The other circumstance that happens sometimes is, let's say someone was a lousy parent and now you're stuck with taking care of that person that wasn't there for you. Or they were a great parent, but once you got divorced, they weren't with you. They didn't approve of you getting divorced or married to the wrong guy or whatever. And so you have anger because they weren't there for you as an adult. And so again, here you are having to take care of someone who wasn't there for you. So I really think it's very, very important to be real about your feelings and the past relationship you have with this person. And I advise all my clients to sit down in front of their laptop or with a book and just write everything you ever wanted to say to them and couldn't because of social, you're supposed to be good, right? Get all of it out. Don't worry about punctuation. Don't worry about sentence structure, spelling. Just write your feelings. And then in my case, it would be ask God to take your anger from you, and then go outside or go to your kitchen sink and reread what you wrote, say a prayer, whatever prayer makes you happy, crumple it up and burn it, and ask God to lift those feelings from you. And you will start to feel better. And feelings and emotions are like a tissue box. You take 3 out, there's another one that pops right up, right? It's like onions. We have many layers of onions. So it's okay to say, oh, damn, I thought I got rid of that anger, but now there's a lot more. So write another stream of consciousness thing and repeat the procedure. And you may not need to for months, but it can be incredibly freeing. And the other thing that I tell people is that you need to understand is that the person you're dealing with now is no longer the person that let you down or made you upset before. They are not okay. They are not who they used to be. And to please forgive them as you would wish to be forgiven for what they did, and deal with them where they are now, and
Right.
and try to separate it in your head so that you can not be angry with them, right? Because what happens, my dad had a great saying. He said, sometimes we leak, right? So you can tell if you're leaking. The litmus test for leaking is if someone walks by you and says, hey, how are you? And if you start immediately going, boom, well, blah, 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 when that person just wanted to say hi and keep walking, you're leaking. So if you feel the need to tell somebody your woes, that's when you're leaking. And that's when you should call a therapist, because that's what you need. So, and it's very reasonable to need a therapist or someone to talk to. I don't care who it is, It could be a pastor in your church. It could be Mrs. Smith down the street. It could be Uncle Joe who works at the garage and you can take a coffee break with him. It doesn't matter. You need someone to talk to, right?
Mm-hmm. Those are
And
real tips.
thank you. And I think that's really important. And self-care is really paramount, because the statistics range from 20 to 60%, depending on different circumstances, of caregivers that die before the person they're caring for. So you really need to make sure you care for yourself. Do not put off your lab work. Do not put off your regular health visits, right? You can't do that. I don't care if you've got to hire someone, ask someone from your church, ask a neighbor to stay with your loved one who can't be alone. Get somebody to stay with them. And then you need to go and do your appointments and take care of yourself. Get your hair cut. Get your nails done if that's what makes you happy and brings you joy, like it does me. Don't neglect your physical body, because every time you look in the mirror and you see a bedraggled, like in my case, a bedraggled Lili, that didn't make me happy, right? That didn't make me happy at all. It just reminded me of how exhausted I was and how overwhelmed I was. But if I took the time to put myself together just a little bit, then it was a little easier to cope with everything. And also, fake it till you make it, that old thing. When you're dealing with doctors and nurses and other people, you want to make sure that you come in looking like you're going to take no prisoners, because you are your loved one's advocate. So even if you're not feeling strong and you're feeling overwhelmed, anytime you're dealing with the medical people, I want you to put up, be like that peacock that, and ruffle your feathers and go in there looking like you're someone to be reckoned with, because you will very often need to fight for your loved one. I had to do it many times.
Wow. Yeah.
And a lot of times there's hospitals and doctors' offices that have lovely people that are learning, their residents, and they can be great, but they don't know everything. And so, and they may doubt what your loved one says or you say about your loved one, but stick to your guns. You know them better than anybody.
Yeah. Good to use your discernment and things, and to speak your truth when you need to.
Speak your truth.
Oh, yeah.
Speak your truth. Yeah.
That is fantastic. What about a lot of people, like you hit on a lot of topics with people with caregivers. They do get overwhelmed and they got to make sure they do things for themselves.
Yes.
Do you have any tips for people who have dementia or
I do.
Yeah.
I do. A lot of things. Dementia, if you have a loved one that is experiencing cognitive issues, I want you to not just think of yourself as a caregiver. I want you to think of yourself as a problem solver and a detective. So I had one client whose aunt had dementia and she was bedridden. And this woman used to take walks and she loved her walks. And she would agitate, I need to take my walk. Well, she couldn't physically walk anymore, but she would talk about it. So what I did is I had my client get her coat, move her up in bed, swing her legs to the side of the bed, put on her socks and shoes, put her coat on her, stand there with her so that she didn't fall, talk for 15 minutes because her Alzheimer's, we knew that she would be distracted by then, and then exclaim very loudly, "Oh my goodness, what a wonderful walk you just had. Let's get you back into bed. You must be exhausted. And once I get you back into bed, I'll get you a cup of water to wet your whistle." And then she would take off her jacket, she would take off the shoes, she'd get her back into bed. And then she'd say to her, "What was the thing you liked the most? I liked the bluebird that we saw. What did you like best?" And because she had been on so many walks, she could pull from her memory some of the things she had seen on previous walks. Then she'd say, "Oh, I like the cardinal," or something like that. And it gave her the gift of having been on that walk, even though she never left her bedroom. Right? So you've got to roll with it. You got to roll with it.
Absolutely.
They're scared. That's the most important thing for you to remember. Whether or not they accept the fact or acknowledge the fact that you have some form of dementia, they are scared. They know something is not right. So when they get angry, remember they're like a child, a frightened child. Things don't make sense to them. On my website, I had a wonderful article by Lyle Weinstein that you can find in my blog section. And his father had Alzheimer's, and his sister wrote a book, and her editorial was in January, or was in December, and then his was in January. And they both offer lots of really interesting perspectives on dementia. But what Lyle explains in his editorial is, if you ask them a question, say, "Hey, do you want blah, blah, blah for supper? Or do you want this?" Well, first of all, they have to remember what the word supper meant. Then they have to remember what this choice meant and what that was. And then they have to remember what the other choice was. And they may not be able to do that, right? So one of the things I say, well, this sort of backs up into my sensory care thing. So I created a sensory care method based on my aunt who had dementia and my father who was blind. So we very often forget what to ask, what still tastes good to you. Yeah, you liked this 20 years ago, but do you still like it? Tastes change. And we don't check people's physical abilities. So I have an assessment where you go through and you figure out exactly what they can see, what they can hear, taste, smell, and if they can touch, what parts of their body still have feeling. Are they numb? Right? Because if you spend hours rubbing your loved one's arm, trying to let them know that you love them, and they've got neuropathy there and can't feel anything, that's kind of a waste of your energy, right? And then you're going to feel bad because they're not responding to you, and you're going to be hurt, and they're not getting the love. So it's a situation that can be avoided if you go through the checklist. And then after you go through and figure out what still works, then there's preference sheets for each of the 5 senses. And then you figure out what they like. If your loved one has dementia and they loved baseball, put on the old Red Sox World Series where they won, right? Doesn't matter if you put it on all day long. They're going to be ecstatic. Their team's winning, right? So, in their room, put things that make them feel secure. It may be things they had when they were a child, or if they had a bad childhood, then maybe not. Maybe something else lights them up. So you want to surround them with things that they love, because that's going to put a smile on their face and make them feel secure without even saying or doing anything. So if you figure out their love language and you figure out the things they love and you surround them with those things in their environment, you're going to have a person that's much easier to deal with and is much more peaceful. Dementia or no dementia, it'll make a big difference.
I think it's good to read. I think you have really good points here, and realization people want to see them as who they were, and they're not. That's not who they are. To accept that, you can't expect them to do what they used to do because they're not there and they're not capable of. I think the acceptance to where they are now and all the tips you gave of how to deal with them are wonderful. I'm going to bring your book up. And,
oh, great.
Because I want you to talk a little bit. They'll get a lot of wealth of information on your book. And I want to say thank you to Beth, and make sure if everybody wants a drawing to win she's got a new book release out, and she will sign it. You have to chat hi or something in order for the drawing. But thank you, Beth, for joining us. And this is her book, Lili's Caregiver's Guide. And what do you want to say a little bit about your book? It's wonderful.
The book is written so that everybody can understand it. One of my pet peeves is doctors and medical people and accountants and legal people that talk up here, right?
Right.
Yeah, way up there. Excuse me.
Right.
I like language that if you've dropped out of high school and you just got your GED, that it is clear as a bell to you. So the whole book is written so that everybody can read it and get what they need out of it. There shouldn't be any words you have to look up. There's practical advice. There's an index in the back of the book, and it goes from caregiving through death and dying and grief. And in there's how to hire a caregiver. There's interview questions. There's how to hire a caregiving agency, right? And how to deal with them in your home. There's a whole chapter on how to be power of attorney, your loved one's advocate, medical power of attorney, or executor. And there's a piece on what happens if your loved one dies without a will. I have all sorts of things in there about caregiving in special circumstances. I've got an article that says that I called I'm still an adult, thank you. So if your loved one is in a nursing home or they're in your home and they had a martini at 5 p.m. for 40 years, for crying out loud, let them have their martini at 5 p.m. I don't, and the other thing is obviously everybody has to figure this out with their family, their loved one, and their doctors. But I am a huge advocate for, I worked in a nursing home in admissions for a while. And one of the things that broke my heart was when people whose family did not visit them and friends did not visit them, who were never going to go home, were put on restrictive diets because they were overweight or they had diabetes or whatever. For crying out loud, if the only pleasure in life your loved one gets is watching TV and eating food, let them salt their food. Let them put the butter on the potatoes, you know. If they die a month early, is that a problem? I don't think so. They're in their bed and they can't move, So it's looking at life to bring the most quality versus quantity. And I think that's really important. The other thing that I think is incredibly important is if you know that your loved one is not doing well and is at home, get hospice involved. If they have issues because of the word hospice, then call it palliative care, because palliative care is the beginning of hospice, right? It's comfort care. And it is so important. I cannot emphasize enough how many regular doctors are not comfortable giving people morphine who are in pain, who are dying. I don't know why, because clearly if the person's dying, they're dying. But a lot of regular doctors have issues with that. Not all of them, but a lot do. And I've run into it with my own family and had to fight to get the morphine doses increased. And then once the moment hospice stepped in, they immediately said, oh, well, that's not enough to do anything, help them at all. And they increased the dose exponentially. So learn from my mistake. Get hospice involved as soon as appropriate and get that order from your loved one's doctor, because it will make all the difference. And it's covered by Medicare.
Yeah, thank you so much. You have a wealth of information for people. I wish people like yourself wish you had this guide, but with all your wealth of experiences put in this book, how can people purchase your book? How can they get a hold of this book? Are you going to be on Amazon? Where will it be?
It's already on Amazon. It's on Walmart.com and it's on BarnesandNoble.com.
And you also, how can people get a hold of you? How can people?
My website. Thank you. MuchLoveLily.com is my website. And all you have to do is there's a feedback form. You can write to me there or write to me at Lili, Lili, at MuchLoveLily, my company name.com.
Well,
And
you have a wealth of information on your website too, though.
I do. I have a huge resource section on my website because it's my passion to make sure the caregivers have access to all the information I wanted and couldn't find when I was one. So I'm constantly expanding that. So there's lots of things, all sorts of things there you can see, including, books to read if you're curious about life after death, what's going to happen to my loved one, things like that, as well as resources for dementia and a lot of resources for grief. I also have a newsletter that comes out twice a month. The first newsletter is on caregiving. The second one is on grief, with guest editorials. So lots of information for free.
Yeah. Make sure you check out our website. Make sure you get on her newsletter. You also offer counseling.
I do. All sorts of services, and I can help you. I will be there for you 24/7. It costs a little bit, but that's what you need sometimes if your loved one's going through a healthcare crisis, so that you have access to me in the middle of the night from the phone when mom falls and you don't know what to do, because everybody needs somebody to be there.
Well, we want to say we have a winner. Now, they didn't have to go out to go do the tool thing, because we have one person, anybody that chats gets in the drawing. Oh, Beth Perry is the winner today.
Woohoo, Beth.
Yeah, she's amazing. And Beth, make sure you email me at sherrylordpodcast@gmail.com with your address, and I will send it and forward it to Lili, and she will personally sign this book for you. And I tell you what, this is priceless, what she's offering. I mean, so many people, it's been rough going through the system. She really has it right here in her book and on her website to guide you. And get a chance, check her out. Thank you, Lili, so much for being on our show.
Thank you for having me.
And make sure you go to www.com, sherrylord.com, because we have Lili's information there too. And if you want to be a guest on our show or place an ad, go to www.sherrylord.com. Thank you, and everyone, for joining us and watching us, and those who chat. Thank you.